First up, though, we've heard so much, haven't we, about big events, pilot events. Oh, yes, of course, Wembley being up to 60,000 spectators for the semi-finals and the finals. That's a pilot event. Wimbledon, another pilot event, full for the finals there. And, of course, we had Ascot. And basically, I think the people making the decisions, it's sporting events that they enjoy that have been pilot events. Also seen pilot events, some concerts and club nights as well. Well, there was a big research into this, the government's events research programme. The government, though, for some reason has chosen not to publish the results, saying they've been very positive. Well, a scoop from the Politico playbook has discovered that actually, looking at that document, they've seen the internal economic impact assessment. They know that the economic impact is huge from every single measure being used to keep these events limited. But also they discovered that actually there had been just 15 cases of COVID transmission across every test event in total. Extraordinary, and yet not published publicly. Let's talk to Stuart Barr. He's chief executive of Out to Perform and a conductor, musical director for many years for Dame Shirley Bassey. Good morning to you, Stuart.
Good morning, Julia.
I just got this really strong urge to talk a Goldfinger. I shan't do that. I would regret doing that on that. It is extraordinary, isn't it? The government does this research. They have the pilot events. You can bet your bottom dollar if we'd seen hundreds of cases of COVID, they'd have published that. The fact they were only able to detect some 15 cases across all of these different events involving thousands upon thousands of people. Many of those COVID cases, by the way, may have just happened anyway. And they've chosen not to publish that. Why do you think that is?
Well, absolutely, Julia. I mean, this is the fascinating thing. The government was trumpeting this study. This is apparently the world's largest study in COVID at outdoor events and indoor events. So we should be trumpeting this and releasing the data, but the government has sat on it. In fact, it was supposed to publish it last week in line with the decision point for step 4, but it decided not to. And we're pretty certain this is not the DCMS. We're pretty certain this has been stopped from the very top of the government. And we're just a bit concerned that it contains such good news that the government sort of almost doesn't want us to see that good news. It wants us to sort of be locked down for another 4 weeks whilst it's one final push. But the trouble is that the event sector, the theatre sector, the music sector, we need this data. We need this data out in the open now, because we need to be able to plan for the months and the years ahead.
Yeah. I mean, this is the bizarre thing. I know what is and what isn't safe. And the idea is, of course, outdoor events we know are infinitely safer than indoor events. But again, we've had testing for a lot of these events. So I do wonder how much we can read into this. If you have a whole load of people who tested negative for tests, and a lot of these cases, people were wearing masks as well. They're not. They actually, there's very little evidence they actually make any difference if people are healthy. If people are unhealthy, they do. If they're healthy, they've already proven they've got a negative test. Then I can't see the point of it at all. Then you wouldn't expect to see many cases. I've always thought with these cases, what you'd want is test people, not tell them whether or not they were positive or negative. I don't think ethically you could probably get away with doing this. Then have them do the event, and then see whether or not that the case is spread. That would perhaps be more accurate, but ethically, morally, legally rather difficult to do. But, if you have a whole load of people who've tested negative for COVID meeting up together, I mean, how many people were they expecting to test positive afterwards, realistically?
Well, absolutely. Although in defence, they did actually test all sorts of different permutations about it. But there's something actually a bit more worrying that's come out of this leaked data that we saw yesterday. Because whilst we saw the government's economic impacts, the different levels of interventions that they would make, all of which are pretty terrible and disastrous for the industry, the thing that was perhaps most worrying was they did an attitude survey into different interventions in terms of members of the public. And the really worrying thing is that if people were told, for example, to wear masks, that people would be 28% less likely to go and see something. So it means that we've sort of conditioned people into being worried about something, irrespective whether it's indoor or outdoor.
Well, there are people who won't go to things because people aren't wearing masks, and there are people who won't go to things because they are. I have to say, it massively puts me off. There are lots of things I want to go back and do, but I want to do it when I can do it with a whole load of people. I mean, I don't want to go to a club night with people wearing masks and you're only allowed a certain number of people. It's nice to have more space on the dance floor, but frankly, the whole point is to be among a crowd of people and enjoying that. So this is the thing. It is very clear the economic impact, the devastation in terms of the number of people willing to buy tickets or attend to any event is still going to be there if you keep masks, if you keep any social distancing, any measure at all, which a lot of people say is very minor, will have a massive impact on the ability of the industry across events to actually get back on its feet. So the hope is that July the 19th, it's all over.
Absolutely, but there is one great concern which has come out of this, which is that in that attitude survey, they've actually suggested that people would be more likely to go and see events if there was mandatory testing. Now, this is really worrying. Now, we're working with the outdoor theatre sector where, you know, the risks are so low. And we're very worried that the government is going to introduce unnecessary mandatory testing, COVID passports, all that
so
stuff.
it reassures people, but it's not needed. And again, I mean, lots of people saying just vaccine passports. I mean, I've always said, you know, if I have to show a vaccine to go abroad, if the other country requires it, so be it. But I will never, ever show my vaccine proof to get into anything or any event in this country, because that's not the country I want to live in.
These are civil liberty restrictions, and we need to fight against every single one of them where they are not necessary.
Absolutely. Stuart Barr, really good to talk to you, Chief Executive of Out to Perform. He's also a conductor. Really appreciate you joining us. Hope you'll come on the show again. 9:31 is the time. Up next, what's been happening with Britney Spears and what's happening